excited to introduce you to our next esteemed Fireside Chat speaker, Bill Tai. Bill is really exceptional individual. He has his early background as a computer designer, and he was part of the formation of TSMC, the world's top 10 largest company today. Even more special, he was issued badge number 1. Employee badge number 1. He has been investing since 1991, so a long time, and he has at least maybe 23 of his early seed investment or early project that has become a public company. So just to give you an example, first check in Zoom, first check in Canva, literally put together the founding team of Canva. And he's the pioneer in crypto mining and investing. And now he's a founding chairman of Hut 8, which is a company, public company that has a portfolio of energy asset, digital asset, crypto mining, and AI data center. So please join me to welcome Bill to the stage.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So thank you so much, Bill, for joining us today.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, this morning we had a panel talking about the energy transformation, and what we've seen is like a tremendous growth in AI data center, many projects being announced about build, right? And you have built the data center yourself way before this become a thing, and your company, Hut 8, is really right at the center of this debate of more compute and more energy. So I thought it might be very helpful for you to tell the audience the original story of Hut 8 and how it evolved over time. And I think we stole some pictures.
Yeah, sure. Oh, yeah. I don't know what's on these slides, but I guess I can explain some of these along the way. Yeah, so a little bit more subtleties on background. So I came out to the Valley here in the mid '80s, and if I think many of you are hardware people with a little bit of hardware background, because that's been lost over the last 10 or 15 years in the venture industry with all these web children. But I was at the startup called LSI Logic with the former CEO of Fairchild, and unbelievable the people we had in that company, because some of our teammates included Jensen Huang. And I don't know if you guys know Marty Colombato, but he ended up trying to convince Wilf to make ASSPs for communications, and we didn't do it. So he joined Henry Nicholas and Henry Samueli, and he became the general manager of Broadcom and turned it into a comm IC company. Moshe Gavrilov was with us. He became CEO of Xilinx, and John Dana, who became CEO of Altera. Anyway, so clock forward a bit, I ended up going into venture capital. Somewhere around 2000, I actually retired for a bit, because the 90s were this magic period where everything could go public. so I had quite a run, and in the mid-90s, I started an ISP because of the Taiwan relationships from TSMC, where I was in 1987 to help put the plan together. TSMC became a thing, and I had contacts with the government, so I bought a bunch of Cisco routers and had them shipped to Taiwan, started an ISP called AUNet. If you guys remember UUNet, which became kind of the king of B2B internet. And that evolved from an ISP to become data centers in 10 countries. In year 2000, Goldman, Morgan, and Solomon took it public. I retired for a little bit. I started kite surfing, and I became a sponsored athlete. But also that year in 2000, I put together a project. If any of you are hardware people and remember Transmeta, I was also the founding investor that put that team together, and it included Dave Ditzel, who had invented the SPARC microprocessor, and Linus Torvalds. And so Linus and I and a few other people started a peer-to-peer network file storage system in 2000, which would lead to a story I'll tell you in a minute, because I got my hands on peer-to-peer. That got acquired by Nokia to become their iCloud, launched with the web phones in 2006. And in 2003, I became Alan Greenspan Gollum in Second Life and launched with Philip Rosedale a currency, the Linden dollar. So those 2 points, 2000 peer-to-peer networks, 2003 currencies, led to me finding the Bitcoin white paper in 2009. And by 2010, I was mining. So now put up that picture. Okay, so these, what you see on the little red flanges there, those are mostly chips to make something work on USB, but on there is a Bitcoin mining ASIC. And so I was, with a few other people, the backers of what became the highest volume Bitcoin mining ASIC from about 2013 to maybe 2017. This was under the label of a company called Bitfury. And by 2017, and that's my son, we turned our dining room into a data center. Those pictures are probably...
It's a real startup in the garage, right? In the dining room in this case.
2014 was, we were mining away at home, but by 2017, we had 800 million watts of electricity running in data centers in Iceland, Finland, Norway, Azerbaijan, Republic of Georgia, some small centers in Kazakhstan, and in Texas and Canada. In 2018, we chopped off 100 million watts and took it public, and that's Hut 8 mining today. And we took another 100 million watts. That's a public company called Cipher Mining. And underneath Hut, we have another subsidiary. So you might have heard about a company called American Bitcoin. I mean, if you're in the space, you'll know it. But we took our mining assets, dropped it into a new company. The Trumps bought 20% of it. That's now public as ABTC on NASDAQ, and Hut is HUT. Hut has transitioned to become an energy infrastructure company. We now have optioned out 13 gigawatts of electricity. This is a Bitfury data center. This one happens to be in Republic of Georgia. The servers that you saw had these cards. Each one of those little gold tigers on there is actually on the other side of where you drop a die down, which would be our Bitcoin mining ASIC. Each one of those little dots was a chip that is the functional equivalent in hash power of 9,600 standard personal computers. And so we would have about 12 of those boards in a kind of a 3U rack, and then, this is our data center. This is a small data center, but this is I think this is a 10 megawatt data center. Hut 8 today, we have under construction a data center that's 5.5 football fields long. And that one's in Louisiana, and it's you'll probably this is immersion cooling. So this is 10 years. This picture's 10 years old, but we literally were running immersion cooling. This is a company. So now Bitfury is now a holding company that had its part of Hut 8, Cipher Mining, immersion cooling, Accelera. If you know the AI chip company that was started inside Bitfury, Crystal Internet, which is a blockchain explorer. But that was immersion cooling 10 years ago.
Wow, you saw it coming way ahead of the time.
Yeah,
so.
And we're providing this technology now to some hyperscalers.
I see. So that's the picture. That's
this
the
is Republic of
day,
Georgia.
right?
This is our Republic of Georgia data center.
Yeah, and that's the one coming up.
Yeah, that's the beginning. Yeah, this is Hut 8's data centers now. So they've evolved quite a lot from my little red ASIC sticks in the dining room. That was a picture from when Hut 8 went public.
Yeah. So what do you say is the biggest lesson learned building the data center in the early day that could translate to the data center of today?
So I've been through a couple generations of these, and it's laughable. If you look at the data centers that we put up in the mid-90s, literally we had big rooms with air conditioning, chain link fences to partition spaces, and power cords running into these things, and we would have 3-ring binders hanging on chains off of the chain link fences per customer that had the instructions on what you had to do to reboot shit when it went down.
Wow.
And that's what data centers were like in the mid-90s. And then as you clock forward to today, you saw the picture of the Bitcoin mining data center. That's not even what you call a tier 1 data center, because the regular computer data centers evolved to have, as you guys have all been in these, raised floors with a lot of power redundancy, mega air conditioning, really clean, that went from kind of computers to these GPU data centers, and they, stayed along those lines. When you're hooking up GPUs, depending on what you're doing, if you're doing training, some of these clusters now, they're going for 100,000 GPU clusters. There's clusters out there that are 10,000 to tens of thousands that exist, but some are trying, bigger density. And if you look at the way kind of a brain is set up, or these neural networks of GPUs, you have an insane number of connections. And if any of those goes down, you kind of have to restart. You don't have to restart everything because you clock back a little bit and start training again. But the reliability and the kind of the precision of your connectors and cabling and the PHYs running the signals on and off chip have to be just perfect. Bitcoin mining wasn't like that. Bitcoin mining was that Iceland data center you saw that was really clean and pretty. We used that as a showcase, but a lot of our other stuff was sort of tin shacks with that. We didn't have dirt floors, but some of the ones in China we'd compete with had dirt floors and just garbage, But ours were pretty good. The power was very important. You didn't have the same issues you have with AI, where if things stop, you got to start over. So we would just design stuff so that you could like hot swap. So if things went down, you could see it on a monitoring board, and a kid could literally go rip a card out and put it in, and just keep going. So there's kind of a tiering of data centers now where I'd say Bitcoin, AI is like tier 1. The Bitcoin miners, we're at a non-existent tier, and we're inventing new categories of classifications, like it doesn't mean anything to you, but like a tier 3.5, that looks nice, the floor's pretty solid, but it may not have power redundancy, may not have water and tubing for liquid cooling, but there's all kinds of variations now. And for a long time, the hyperscalers didn't even want to mess with the Bitcoin people. But now the quality's come up, and the energy shortage has become even bigger. Back in the 90s, we used to build out energy density to about 15 kilowatts, sometimes 25 kilowatts per rack that could support a 6-foot rack. I see plans now for data centers that have power feeds of 500. It's mind-blowing to think of 500 kilowatts per rack. And like the top tier ones today that are operational, there's a few out there, I think, that like at 300 kilowatts a rack. But to go to 500 is just mind-blowing. And so
it is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So maybe double-click on that a little bit. Like you talks about building the data center all around the world, and I want to understand like what was the reason driving that model that go all around the world. And you probably have seen the grid infrastructure in countries that are more proactive, and what can be the lesson that translate back to the United States is have like aging grid infrastructure and so on.
We need a very hard reset here on everything to do with the grid. I mean, big time. It's like forklift upgrade, because I think the grid that is in place today was kind of designed maybe 50 years ago, something like that. And I think most of the grid out there has been in place for 50 to 100 years and not really changed so much. And in the Bitfury days, before we split it up in all these little companies, we were always in search for low-cost electricity. And I think when I started, you could still actually, and so if you guys follow Bitcoin at all, you have all these peer nodes out there competing and, kind of doing their calculations and all that stuff. And your probability of making Bitcoin is a function of what percent of the overall network your compute power is. So if you have like unit X and there's 100 others, you've got, like 1% chance. If you got 10,000, it drops. And so the more compute power you put up, the more you'll make as a percentage. And so I think in like the 2010 through 2012 era, there weren't so many people mining, and you could still make a little bit of money with, much lower price Bitcoin, but at, 10 cents, 12 cents a kilowatt hour. These days, we're constantly on a search for, and you could do it with like a laptop at home. Now, I think we won't even consider a site unless we can bring it up at kind of 200 megawatts and have line of sight to maybe getting it closer to a gigawatt per site. And we target 3 cents a kilowatt hour. Yeah, if we can find it, 1 to 3 cents is our sweet spot. A lot of that stuff is what you call behind the meter. So you basically just set up your power gen and your buildings, and you don't have to go on the transmission lines. Because I think all of you that, most of you have electronics backgrounds, I presume, but for those that don't, carriage of electricity is a lot like carriage of water. So if you imagine, because people can't see electrons in a grid, but everybody has seen a water tower. So you've got the water tower and the big pipe down, and then it's kind of branch and tree, almost like a cable network feeding all the buildings. And you basically are constantly pumping water molecules up to the top for pressure. And then that stuff will flow down and branch out, and you can have like leaky faucets and still like, kind of full. I think because the nature of energy production has changed so much and is finally at super scale for solar, wind, hydro. Imagine having that like water tower with all the little branches and a bunch of people pumping a lot of water into the faucets to keep the pressure up at different frequencies. And because all of you probably have some electrical background, you'll remember those experiments in films of experiments in high school where you got this like very smooth water and these two things going like this, making waves, and so you'll remember that when there's waves that are harmonically resonating, they get bigger. And if they're not, they cancel each other out. So a lot of these power grids have to have a carrier frequency that this other stuff comes on and matches. Otherwise, it kind of messes up the system. And so you probably had all read about the multi-country blackout that happened in Portugal, Spain, France, just in the last summer. Yeah, so I think this is one of the issues because the grid was built around this concept of central output just pushing all the time. And now it's got all these endpoints at very high variability in very big amplitude and changing frequencies, and energy also coming in. And it's like a similar issue to when internet providers tried to put internet onto cable networks. Because when you have a ring architecture, which is a standard phone system, it's a very different situation than a branch and tree cable feed to neighborhoods where you're trying to get the signal to swim upstream. It's like, why is it that when you have cable internet, your download is like gigabytes and your upload's 1.5 megabytes? Because you've got these to swim upstream, and you've got all these like reflective and inductive things that mess it up. So the power grid's the same in a way, not exactly the same, but similar issues. And I think if you look at what happened when the internet broke out, it put this insane strain on the phone system. And it wasn't just the physics, it was also the economic strain, because the phone companies could charge you $1.40 a minute for a long distance call, but you could send VoIP packets for free. So big dilemma for these CapEx heavy companies that suddenly their revenue could be gone, and they wanted to kill it. They wanted to fight it. So ultimately, the government had to get involved, and you'll all recall, maybe distant memory, the Telecom Deregulation Act of 1996 that broke up AT&T into the RBOCs, Regional Bell Operating Companies, and allowed the creation of ILEX and CLEX and WorldCom and MFS, and all of a sudden, all the little branches of what used to be AT&T units could compete with each other and kept lowering prices and improving quality and bandwidth for data. because it was commercially the right thing to do and because they had been broken up and deregulated. So I think the power grid, different architecture, there's not one monopoly company like AT&T, but you have kind of regional monopolies in a way like you do with what the cable operators are like in some sense. It's not like two allocated per area, but there's been no incentive for the operators historically to really innovate because I think electricity has always been seen as a public good. So when you try to get transmission approved and new generation approved in certain areas, typically, depending on the geography, you have to go through these public utility commissions. So you could spend, 2 years ago, I spent almost a year and a half trying to acquire an old rock quarry that had a potential, not deployed, 300 megawatt feed to it. And I figured if I bought it and held it, it'd be worth something someday, And so I worked on, with all these contractors to kind of spec everything out and got to a point where all I needed to know from the power company was, can you just give me kind of a range? I just need like a range. Is it going to be like 3 cents or 7 cents or 5 plus or minus 2? That's all I need to know. I just need to know it's kind of in the band of, where it can work. And they were like, well, I'm sorry, we just really can't tell you. I mean, you can't tell me I don't need the pinpoint. I just need kind of a range. No, it could be anything. I said, what do you mean it could be anything? Well, it literally could be anything. Anything? How does that? What? I mean, what the power costs? Well, we have to go through the Public Utility Commission. And so when you go through that process, it's kind of a committee and there's all these local citizens and they might want to add a little bit of an adder here and a little adder there and a little more cost here. So I really can't tell you. I said, not even like a range. Well, I mean, I can't, there's no way. No, I mean, it could be a plus or minus 20 cent range. What? And so after a year of work, we just dropped it,
Wow.
But it's just, so the regulatory part of delivering power, depending on where you are, is so complicated. And the cost structure of laying the transmission lines is expensive. It's a little bit like, the fiber build out in the internet. You guys remember pictures of Quest Communications that worked with the railways, and they'd get like a big car with a giant trench over it, and then as the railway would go, it would just dig grooves into the dirt, and over time they just laid all this dark empty fiber, and eventually that became worth tens of billions of dollars because it got used. But we don't have something like that right now because the grid is it's just a messy architecture that's a 50 to 100-year-old legacy of politics.
So how do you think the hyperscalers and data center will crack this nuts? Because everybody announced that they're going to build such a huge supercluster and everything, right? Everyone's going to be the power utility developer by themselves? Is that sort of
well,
the
you
idea?
saw Microsoft committed to, I think it was Constellation Energy, to guarantee purchasing of the output to relight the nuclear power plants on 3 Mile Island. Google has done something like that too. There's little nuclear operators like TeraWulf that I think it was Google with a company called FluidStack that guaranteed a contract to fill the need, to take all the power out of that. But the demand equation, it's very hard to know what's really going to be real because we're in this period where, much like the build out of the internet in the late 90s, the growth of traffic was so high you could project to the moon. And eventually the data center capacity and the phone line and submarine capacity got overbuilt. And then it all popped, But I think there are some differences between the two cycles, which I'll maybe touch on later too. But I think we're in a period now where the growth rate, if I look back to like 6 months ago, when I was asked, how much energy we're going to need, the guy that was kind of like the high side estimate that I would use is Eric Schmidt, and he was out there testifying in front of Congress that if you took the announced and funded data center builds for the end of all the way to the end of 2027, that we needed, I think it was 23 gigawatts of power just to fuel what's already been announced. And you can roughly say 1 gigawatt is one nuclear power plant. And if you looked at 2030, beyond the 23 to 27, it was another 63. So this would say that in 5 years, we need to build 90 nuclear power plants. And there's like 2 under construction that 10-year builds. You know, so there's a problem ahead. And so I think, and back then, I thought that was like his estimates were way off the charts. His estimates are low now. Which
Wow.
I looked the other day at some recent data, and I was like, oh shit, you know, like some people are saying that we need twice as much as that in 5 years, which it's really hard to fathom. You know, so that was part of the reason at Hut where we were kind of Bitcoin mining and we built some AI data center capability. We basically put those into subsidiaries and just started acquiring energy. So we've optioned out, like I said, 13 gigawatts. So, you know, we still got to light it up, but at least we're holding the contracts. And then you know, I think Bitcoin miners have a different economic profile than AI data center companies. But if you have the CapEx to put the machines on, you literally are making money immediately. So you can cover the costs of the deployment until you can transition that energy to other uses, which in some cases, you know, the machines get old and die out, and then you maybe, you know, move it over to AI data centers if your build quality on the buildings was good enough, and if the hyperscalers or others will be tenants.
This is really thought-provoking, but I think I only have 5 minutes. I'm going to do one rapid-fire question before I switch to the audience question. I want to ask you the same question as the last panel on AI data center. If you have 1 billion, actually, that's a wrong question. You have 1 billion. That's
not enough for this industry. It's a drop in the bucket in this industry.
Yeah, the audience wants to know, what would you be investing in? Yeah.
Well, that changes every day. Okay, so I will say that in the last 7 or 8 months, the place that I have been in part, you know, I don't buy and sell my own stock at Hut 8 because I'm chairman and you get stuck, you know, you got to file all these reports, but the neoclouds. So whether it's Iris Energy, like look up tickers, I look at the charts of IREN, so Iris Energy, Cipher Mining, CIFR, Nebius I didn't buy because I thought it was kind of up there already, but IREN and Cipher, I don't know, but the multiple's got to be like 4 to 7x in 6 months. I do have a holding in GE Vernova, which, you know, it's been up and down. It's a very, very highly valued company already with like $100-something billion market cap. But when you try to acquire power generators and transformers, there's like a 7-year wait, you know, 5-year wait. It depends on what you want to get. And people are basically paying millions of dollars to just jump the line and take over someone else's order. And, you know, GE Vernova makes many, many things, so it's only a little part of their business. But I think power generation and the transformer part, those seem obvious to me. There's a whole slew of data center companies that I have not bought, you know, because I thought the power was maybe a little bit better. But look at companies like Vertiv. You know, I think the uranium companies might, you know, it's a little bit speculative because there aren't enough nuclear reactors being built, but I think, you know, uranium could become a lot more in demand soon, depending on what happens with regulatory.
So to distill it down, I think AI is a new currency, but AI runs on energy, so it's a combination of the two.
Yeah, absolutely. And TSMC too. You know,
TSMC,
like so,
the
you know,
enabler.
there's obviously a lot of psychological controversy as to whether China's ever going to invade Taiwan or, you know, something, and that's an overhang on that stock. But if you think about just the existence, the lifeblood of NVIDIA, AMD, Broadcom, Marvell, they cannot exist without TSMC. And TSMC has been raising prices, as probably some of you know. So I don't remember the exact details over the last quarter, but if I'm not mistaken, they grew revenue 30 or 39% year over year on big numbers, and earnings are correspondingly going up, but it's something, maybe it's earnings with 39% of it, whatever it is, they have pricing power. And all of the new wafers that they're selling in the newer geometries, they've been able to raise the prices because you have customers like NVIDIA. Like I've never seen anything like NVIDIA before. If you think about you can buy a Tesla around $45,000, and maybe Tesla makes $3,000 to $5,000 net income on that thing, or you can buy a GPU. And $45,000 of revenue, and $40,000 of gross margin, and $35,000 of cash flow, at scale. At a company that I don't know what their growth rate is, but it's been growing 100% a year for a while, and maybe it's dropped a little bit, but there's a lot of room in there for pricing appreciation for wafers from TSMC if they want them. So I think it's all got to flow to TSMC as a choke point at some point.
We have time for one question in the audience.
Hi, Bill. Thank you so much for coming. We have entrepreneurs in the room. Let's think about what would be your tip for entrepreneurs who are building this energy infrastructure.
Well, so the basics of how I think venture people look at entrepreneurs and their opportunities in general. I learned this so you guys probably all know who Don Valentine is, because he's a Silicon guy, and LSI Logic was funded by Fund 2 of Sequoia. And so when I went into the venture business, I basically tagged along and followed him around a bunch because he had been on our board at LSI. And I did get stuck in a airport after a board. You guys know Microchip? They had funded Microchip, and I tagged along in that. Microchip obviously has become kind of world standard in microcontrollers outside of Intel architecture. But at the dinner where we were stuck in the airport, I was this very young venture capitalist, and I said, Don, what do I have to do to be good at this? And he said, and if you know his reputation, he's harsh, doesn't say very much. It's like, it's really very simple. You only have to get 3 things right: markets, management, and don't overpay. And you get those 3 things right, you'll make money every time. He said, but if you get the market wrong, you can have the best team in the world and infinite money, and you'll lose money every time. So now, this is back in the day when businesses were asset heavy, not these like young web children. So he said, just pick the really biggest effing market you can find, and you swap the people in and out till it works. But that's Don. That's not me. Okay, so now I don't do that. I can't fire anybody. So I think I'm looking for a big market where there's a structural dislocation occurring, where a small company has as good a chance as a big company. And I'm looking for an entrepreneur that is mission-driven, not mercenary. Because I found when people come into it because they think they're going to make a lot of money, it never works. Because they're just not there. It's not coming from inside. So folks like Eric Yuan from Zoom or Melanie from Canva, it was their life mission to bring what they brought to market, and they didn't actually think about. They weren't there because, I'm going to do this because I can make a lot of money. They wanted to deliver a solution to a problem that they had and make sure that everybody had access to that. And those kinds of entrepreneurs, I think, are more durable. And then if I can, at an early stage company, if you're doing seed stuff, if I can find, like in the case of Canva, she described what she wanted to build. She was 23 years old, making high school yearbooks in her mom's living room in Perth, Australia. And she described what she wanted to build, and I said, can you build that? And she said, no, I'm not technical. I said, well, if you can find somebody to build that, then I might back you. And it took 3 years. But a friend of mine, eventually, Lars Rasmussen, who invented Google Maps, he left Google because Zuckerberg poached him to build search at Facebook. And so he had hired 600 engineers at Google Sydney. And so he said, there's 3 guys that are really good. If we can get one of those, we have something. So Cameron Adams was one of his team guys, and we bolted him on Melanie Cliff, and Canva was born. But it's a mission-driven founder, a complete team that has all the things. Durable companies are just piles of people, and I always tell people that it's really about culture and values. And if you can get an organism with the right values and culture that is durable through cycles, it doesn't matter what they're making. You need a product to start, but most companies shuck and jive and change what they're building over years. So that's kind of, so that applies to power too. There's a gigantic structural dislocation happening right now. I think that there has to be what I describe as a context-aware cloud. The grid can't be this set of water pipes with branch and tree architectures going forward. There has to be a way to remake it so there's a kind of a software overlay that has points of load balancing. It's aware of what the endpoints are, a little bit like TCP/IP. Like the internet phone networks used to be, the phone networks used to be dumb. They had a phone number at the end, but now they know what's alive all the time, and they're contextually aware. So I think the grid has to be like that, where it knows what's on the end and can see in real time what's happening to the load, whether it's being sucked out. So it's got to be bidirectional too. So it knows what's coming in, knows what's going out, knows what the loading is like. You can have an AI engine on top of that that over many years collects the data to usage patterns and weather input, different things like where it's automatically ready all the time. I think that has to happen, and that's probably a 40-year build, but the telco build for internet was probably 30 years, and still going. So I think plenty of opportunity for everybody in this room if you find that point of entry.
Thank you so much. Very thought-provoking. It's amazing. I appreciate it.
Thank you.